Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to lecture 32. In the last lecture we discussed the housing strategy, how a housing strategy can be taken for a city, for core city and the new urban extensions. So that discussion was basically on a city level, how for a city you can estimate, you can make estimation for the future housing and allocate the resources like land and finance for various types of the housing. So apart from that, in every cities where you are working, you might have seen that our cities in India, they have 30 to 35%, in some cases more than that, the slum areas and the very poor people. So today we are going to discuss the how the poverty and the poor people lives in the city and how those kind of problem of the urban poverty can be tackled at our end. So within this lecture, we will discuss the types and dimension of the urban poverty, then informal housing typologies, approach in the informal housing planning and actions for pavement dwellers. So let us start with the types and dimension. Before that, let me give you some background data so that you can understand. There were 1.49 million homeless people in India, and the homeless people, they depend basically on the public services and the infrastructure on payment. They are living in the very poor condition. For livelihood, basically the life events are important. Either they come from a very poor background, from a village, or they are subject to the license raj or bribery, theft, or the assault by the system. You can see some of the glimpses, and you can see now few datas like there are homeless people in the pavement 39%, they are living in the shops and home for 14%, railway platform 11%. So total, out of total homeless people, this is the breakup. And not only that, the major causes of the homelessness are the extreme poverty and then absence of the family, abandonment by the family and the family abuse. So apart from the pavement dwellers or the poor people, there are people who are living in the slum areas or a very unhygienic condition. So cumulatively these situations make our urban governance very much challenging, because unless you cannot provide the basic services and the shelter to these people, it is very difficult to run a better government. So let us see the types of poverty. So the poverty can be created through many various means, like it can be income originated or empowerment originated. Suppose somebody is earning money, but he or she is not empowered, maybe he is or she is abused, or the income is not used by him, or somebody is taking the advantage of his income. The education related, if somebody does not have proper education, he is humiliated in the society. So education related. Health related, the poor health relates to poverty. If somebody is not healthy, he cannot work. If he cannot work, he cannot earn money. So health is also related to the poverty. Shelter, if somebody cannot sleep properly in a under the roof, and if he is subject to very much unhygienic condition and the disasters, he cannot work for him or his family. So shelter is another very important dimension. Then personal security in terms of the individual security and the family security and the social security. So these all cumulatively makes the types of poverty. And when we talk about the health, there are various categories. I am not going into that details. So there are few characteristics of the informal housing, like they developed on the encroached land, illegal structure and on owned land, There are most of the cases no formal transaction, because these are either encroached or these are not sold properly. So, in the informal housing they have a robust community, because they have the interactions and the exchanges between the families. Inferior quality of the basic services like water supply, sewerage, drainage, solid waste management. Social and cultural degradation, there are cases of the theft, cases of the antisocial events in the informal housing like slums and squatters and the pavement dwellers. Livelihood is the most important part for the pavement dwellers and the slum people. You might have seen that in our cities most of the urban poor, they live in the congested city areas like railway platforms or railway or the bus terminals or other areas. The basic reason is that they get job within from these areas, informal jobs like running a few shops, running other types of work, those are concentrated on the busy areas like stations, terminals, commercial areas, the public areas like that. So, livelihood is in the most important. So, in past we have seen that if you give a proper housing in the distance area of the city, they will not go there, maybe they will take the housing and they will sell. So, livelihood is the most important part for the informal housing. Now, you can see the housing typologies. What are the housing typologies generally we see in our cities? One is self-help housing, that is people do construct their own house in a enclosed land or their own land. Refugee settlement, because of the political events or the social events like division of the country or division of the states or whatever, the people from one place to another place they come and they settle there, they encroach there, those are called refugee settlement. After the independence and after the formation of the new country Bangladesh, we have seen the refugee settlement in the western part of the country like Rajasthan, Punjab, or in eastern part like West Bengal, Assam, all these places. Apart from that, there are conventional bastis or chawls and jhugri, jhopri on the classical slums in every cities. Every city has their own local name. Some city they name as bastis like Kolkata, chawls are there in Mumbai, jhuggi jhopris are there in the northern part including Delhi. So, these are the classical slums. There are jute lines or the industrial colonies. If there is an industrial area, sometimes along the industrial areas or industrial belts there are also slum population. The squatter settlements basically come along the canals or along the railway lines, they squat and they make informal settlements. The pavement dwellers and unauthorized colonies and urban villages. In the last lecture, since we have introduced these terminologies to you, I am not going into further explanation of these terminologies. Now, what are the dimensions of the informality? The first is the ownership of the land, which is the most important dimension, because owning a land and not owning a land matters a lot in terms of the poverty. If a person owns a land or a part of land or an apartment or a part of a floor area, it means lot of thing. It ensures their shelter, it ensures their social security, it ensures their or it saves them from the abuse from the systems or from the other people. So, ownership of the land or the tenureship is very important. Legal ownership of the building, sometimes they might be possessing the building or the floor area, but legal ownership is not there. So, like maybe the building is leasehold or maybe rented. So, if it is owned fully, it may give the better status and better social security for the poor people. Then duration of the encroachment, if it is a longer duration, the attachment with that place is become higher, and it is very difficult and challenging to replace them with another new housing in new areas. So, challenge will be there, how you can integrate a plan within the same place or the near about place to give them a better housing. The level of services and infrastructure, what kind of services you are going to give for water supply, for sanitation, every aspect, what kind of or what level of services is affordable for these people, and how much you can provide from your overall allocations. Livelihood, primary, secondary, tertiary, how the distribution of the livelihoods is there, whether they are agricultural sector, they are working on the factory, or they are working on a business areas like they are running a shop or something like that. Based on that, the appropriate strategy can be made. Then static or mobile lifestyle, and whether they are familiar single, most of the cases they also come with a single scenario. So, most of the cases the government, the public authorities, they try wherever possible to formalize as per the law. So, these are the dimension of the informality, and sometimes, and also the quality of the structures, the structural condition of the building, these are also very much important determinant in making the strategy for the informal housing. Now, let us see how we define a slum. Slum is a condition and the type of structure. This is the first determinants. Then availability of the essential amenities like sanitation, drainage, water supply, roads, density of the population and urban environments. So, these are the common determinants. So, in slums we find that density is very high, urban environment is inferior, condition of the type of structure is mostly kacha or semi pakka, and availability of the essential amenities, these are very low level of amenities and infrastructure. So, these are some common pictures of the slums. In the last lecture we showed many pictures. These are example of a squatter. You can see how unhygienic can be the condition along a railway line of the squatter settlements, and the whole area is utilized for the public activities also, and it is also risky at times. So, cases of the slum formation, the causes for the slum formation could be creation of the job by industries, business activity, it can be due to political turmoil, riots, fast growing urbanization, rural urban migration, designed habitation for cheap labor, ethnic tie. So, these are all socio political reasons which causes the slum formation in our cities. Now, here the question comes, can we prevent the slum by either stopping or reducing the causes or the reason? That is the most important point of discussion, because in earlier decades in India what we have done, that mostly after the slum is formed, either we have tried to take a curative strategy to either improve them or improve their services, but can we prevent their formation also? That is the most important questions. So, let us see that what kind of planning intervention for the informal housing can be done. So, the two elements which I just discussed, that whether it can be prevented. So, prevention and cure, these are most important point in planning intervention for the informal housing. So, for the prevention we try to create a variety of housing within affordable range to poor people. If you think the situation of the slum formation, how a slum is formed, you will find that in your city people from the surrounding villages or surrounding smaller towns, they come to cities, and since they cannot afford a high value apartment or house, they end up in staying in a very small sized apartment or small sized unit which is sometimes informal, and they can rent it with a very minimum price. So, rental housing is much more important in this context. So, can you create some amount of rental housing which may be smaller in size, but which does not make a large share of the poor people's income. So, those kind of creation of the housing, basically rental housing will be first line of strategy as a prevention strategy for your city. Then for the cure, there are 4 strategies what you can take. The first strategy what you can take is basically upgradation of basic services. In upgradation, you just upgrade the existing infrastructure services like water supply, access road, sanitation, etc. In improvement, you can improve the basic service plus house condition. For example, if the house is kacha, you can make it pakka. If the house is semi pakka, you can make it pakka, and in the same place, and you can also upgrade the infrastructure and the services. So, that makes the improvement, and then you can redevelop the whole thing, redevelop the housing. So, redevelopment, in the redevelopment you demolish the whole area completely and reconstruct the housing in a with a more housing density, and you accommodate few other amount of new housing to make the project viable. For example, if you have a slum in 5 acre of land and you want to redevelop that site. So, you have to replace them into some transit houses, you make the whole housing accommodating the existing slum population and accommodating the new housing for the new people, which housing can be sold to the middle income group or higher income group, so that you can get some surplus amount of money, and with that money you can construct the houses for the poor people, which you have to whom you have replaced or you have kept in the transit houses. So, this kind of redevelopment strategies are also popular in the states like Mumbai, Calcutta or Delhi, in the larger cities. In redevelopment, one major challenge is that the land ownership. Unless you do not have the land under the public ownership, it is very difficult to dismantle everything and make a new project. So, the challenge is to mobilize the land. If the land is owned by the private owner, then it is possible also to negotiate with the private owner and make a sharing of the land, where the private owner shares some amount of the land for rehabilitation of the existing slum population. So, that depends on the negotiation between the public authority and the private owner and the slum population, and in that case this kind of projects also can be developed. So, those kind of methodology is called land sharing. So, the redevelopment is a well known and is a very important methodologies or the approach where public, private, both the authorities and developers are also involved. The next approach what we take is the resettlement. So, there are situations where you cannot upgrade, you cannot improve, you cannot redevelop, because the land is risky or non-tenable for the new housing. So, here you do not approve the further upgradation or improvement of the redevelopment. You simply, for example, the land which is there in the flood prone zone of a river basin, land which is there along the canal or along the railway lines, as the examples I showed, those are the lands which are very much vulnerable for the natural and the man-made disasters and the risk. So, those kind of situation cannot be encouraged. In those cases, they need to be shifted in some areas, mostly it should be nearby areas which is called near site. So, based on this 4 approach, so these are the points what we already discussed, that is a curative situation, a preventive situation. Now, let us see the planning interventions. So, these are the models of the slum improvement, which I told you that off-site model could be replacing in distant place, near site models in replacing them in surrounding areas, and on site is what I told about, that improvement upgradation and redevelopment, whereas the off site and near site model resembles to resettlement and rehabilitation, right. So, on site model is basically what you are doing within the site using improvement, upgradation or redevelopment mechanism. In the off site model, it can be a tenements in the walk up apartment, walk-up apartment, or it can be a low-rise colonies, or it can be site and services, where basically you are giving the sites like that, plots like that, you are giving the basic amenities and like the sanitation and the water supply, and people make their own houses. In the near site model, it can be a small tenements in the walk-up, or it can be kind of a if you have a vacant nearby lands nearby, that can be integrated, and also it is a continuous process because that is the continuous process, and maybe you can make a cluster of the all the rehabilitated or resettled houses in a overall sector or overall areas, and then accommodate them in a particular near site area. So, you may not need large amount of or of the many numbers of the land. So, based on the requirement, you can identify 1 or 2 strategic location where you can take the people from the untenable slum areas and shift them in those transit areas, and then slowly you can make their new houses. So, these are some advantage. I am not going into much details here, so you can read later on. On site models, I have already discussed this. Okay. Now, night shelter. So far what we discussed is that people who has at least some amount of shades over their head, some amount of roof over their head. It can be kacha, it can be semi pakka, something like that. But there are people who are living in the open areas, in the pavements, in the railway stations, in the commercial areas. Those are the pavement dwellers, and for them night shelter is the strategy what we do. So, we create night shelter in the cities, which is surrounded all over the cities, and during the daytime they can do their job, they can work in their job areas, and in the night they can come and they can stay there. Mostly these pavement dwellers are single, and they are migrants from the rural areas and the surrounding city areas. So, let us see how we can do the night shelters. What are the basic features? So, street dwellers cannot even think of any category of the formal housing. Since they cannot have the formal housing, night shelter is the option. So, night shelters are temporary shelter arrangement for urban poor and street dwellers available after evening. The water supply, sanitation facilities provided, basic services is provided, and mostly it is driven or it is conducted by the NGOs. So, in your cities, if you have not done any night shelters, please take a strategy for night shelter. For that, what you need to do is that take an assessment, take a situation assessment of the number of the number of the pavement dwellers where they are living, and based on the total number you can calculate, you can design a night shelter. Try to make it comprehensive, so that night shelter is not isolated from the city, it is accepted by the people, so that it is near to their job location, and also the night shelter can be designed in such a way so that it can also generate some amount of money, some amount of revenue for the municipalities in terms of advertisement. Some amount of shops can be integrated in the night shelters. Now, let us see some of the example. These are example from the city of Delhi. They call this night shelter, and the some of the examples you can see. This is run by a NGO called SPYM, Society for the Promotion of Youth and Masses, and then these are some other pictures in the from the city of Delhi. Mostly they are vulnerable during extreme weather condition like winter. So, during winter it is also a practice that you provide basic amenities like blankets and all those equipment, so that you can at least survive. So, with this I conclude the lecture. In this lecture we have just given you some ideas about the informal housing and the pavement dwellers, and what kind of strategies can be taken for the informal housing and pavement dwellers. For informal housing, we have told that since the origin of the informal housing is from migration from the surrounding villages, and lack of affordable houses and land, and access to the land is main criteria. So, the basic objective, basic intent will be to build their houses on their site itself by enhancing the services, that is upgradation, by enhancing the services and building both, that is improvement, or by recreating the new houses, that is called redevelopment. And also, if the existing site is very much vulnerable in terms of the disaster and the risk, you can also shift them, rehabilitate them, resettle them in a new site which is called resettlement, and in that case your approach, your attempt should be relocate them in surrounding areas, which we are telling as a near site model. So, this models is applicable for some slum improvement. I will share some of the case studies as written document which you can go through, and you can get the idea that what are the tricks and what are the strategies particularly for some cities they have taken to make this successful. And then we also have discussed, also shown the salient features of the pavement dwellers, where from they come and what are the features, and we have told the night shelter is the approach or the intervention what we do for the night shelters. For the pavement dwellers in night shelters, it is a common practice that the basic amenities are there, and based on some basic documentation, the accommodation during the night or evening time it is allowed for the people, and night shelter design can be done in an integrated way. You can accommodate few shops, few advertisement to make it viable, and the location of the night shelter should be in the strategic location, so that it is acceptable and it is accessible by the pavement dwellers. With that, I conclude this lecture. The next lecture I will discuss about the another very important aspect, that is real estate development and the regulation. So, in the last lecture, the area where we discussed the new housing development, where we have discussed that you can allocate the land for the developer, but it is very important to regulate the real estate developer. Otherwise, the new areas can look very shabby, and the objective of the housing for all may not be fulfilled. So, how to regulate and develop the real estate, that's what we are going to discuss in the next lecture. So, I extend my thanks for attending this lecture. Thank you very much.